Okay, we're live with another Talking Palettes, and today my guest is curator and just talented and really quite the visionary. I have to say, Mr. Ivar Zeile. How are you doing, Ivar?
I'm doing great, Dan. It's great to see you. I always love seeing you, and I don't get to see you as much as I like.
Oh, you're sweet. I love being able to chat with you, meet up with you too. We've been having some creative meetings over the last few years, and now during quarantine, your hair's grown out and everything, and you're looking like quite the silver fox.
Well, thank you. You're as handsome as ever, I might say. And, I just feel like I'm not actually getting older. I feel like I'm getting younger because of the pandemic. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Right. Right. Unfortunately, my hairline just keeps retreating, so it's all on my back now.
Well, you look like Aaron Paul.
That's right. We were talking about that. You still look like Mick Garris meets Kevin Kline.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't go wrong with that mixture. The nice, thick, long hair and the handsomeness of Kevin Kline. So, oh man. So, Ivar, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, how you got into art and art curation.
Yeah, damn. I love talking about my backstory. It's sort of so extensive, but I fell in love with art when I turned 19 or so. I had a summer in Boston and visited the Institute of Contemporary Art there because it was free on Fridays and I had no money and I was living in a closet in Boston. And that like I was like, oh well, what do you do when you have nothing? You go to free stuff, and it was a really phenomenal experience. It sort of seeded deep within me a little bit later in life, but there were quite a few steps along the way after that. I started reading this publication called Flash Art. I was living in Salt Lake City at the time, going to school at the University of Utah. And for some reason, I discovered this magazine, and maybe it was the covers or something that drew me in. And I just started reading about contemporary art on my own without having any grounding in it. At the time, I was more immersed in film. And I was actually, my first job curating it all was for the student movie theater at the University of Utah. And so my film immersion became pretty serious and intense. And that, from an artistic standpoint, I would say, yeah, that has great impact on everything that I've done in life since then. I gravitated towards all sorts of arenas within film, and being in Salt Lake City, the main platform was the Sundance Film Festival. So I spent 10 years there working in the trenches in a really great department, in the tech department. I was the presentation manager for the festival for a number of years, with access to all sorts of interesting people and lots of talent. And in my love of film, really just that was the perfect marriage. And then along the way, I started meeting artists in Salt Lake City, and they're pretty interesting people. I never considered myself an artist, but I like the vibe of a lot of them that I was meeting. And I also was had my own business doing custom furniture design. I did a lot of trade show design. I balanced a lot of things in my early years, but the intersection with art maybe started there, and meeting some people who were craftsmen or artistic craftsmen. And after a while, I realized maybe I should be working with them to create designs that were more unique than things you might get done in a different process. And through those intersections, I, met enough like-minded people, and we all decided that in Utah, in Salt Lake City at the time, that the city needed a platform for art that was more progressive and not something that could be monetized. So like everybody does at some point in their life, we started a nonprofit thinking, okay, we're going to support art and artists, and we're going to do it at our own pace in a way that we would like. And that group was called Surface. And we did some really interesting projects. And along the way, I started dabbling in art myself and sort of had this persona of, I'm creative, I'm trying to do some artwork, I'm immersed in film, I have design projects that were taking me around the world where I was able to experience contemporary art in person. And all of that just like added up to this strange fascination with art. And I would say before I became a curator, I started buying art from some of my friends as I was making money. And I realized that that's a process that I didn't know anything about, but it felt natural to me, and sort of brought me to a point in which I decided that I wanted to open up an art gallery. And I did not want to open up an art gallery in Salt Lake City. I decided that I was going to move to Denver, which I did in around 2000, and do the stupidest thing a human being could ever do, which is open up a contemporary art gallery. And that's what I did, bringing sort of all of this weird inspiration with me. And I think I've always felt from the very get-go that I have some sort of stake in curating or intuition for talent. And because of my experience in design, doing my own work, that I really understood the plight of artists, and that they want to create work, but they don't want to sell it. They want to sell it, but you know, trying to do everything is a tough gig. So I opened up Plus Gallery in 2001, and a month before September 11th occurred, and I felt like it was going to go nowhere, and somehow it managed to get over that moment in time, and my own perseverance somehow managed to leverage it into at least a respectable gallery that I think was a good cornerstone here in Denver, with a physical space for many years. And now I just operate privately, handling, you know, work of a handful of artists that they're trying to get to that next level. Everybody's trying to get to that next level. So, and then lastly, because I could just go on and on. 10 years ago, I started developing a project called Denver Digerati, which is something that I would look at as a grand merger of my interest and experience with film from my past, merging with contemporary art in a way that I never would have seen coming. And, you know, currently is one of my greatest interests. It's an obsession. It's an ongoing concern that excites me greatly every single moment. And I feel very lucky to be able to do the work that I'm doing within all contexts within art. It seems like a large privilege, even when there's no money, or particularly because there's no money involved in it, rarely.
Right. Yeah. You know, going back to like Plus Gallery, I remember meeting up with you. Like, yeah, it's almost been 20 years.
Years, man. Yeah, you had that exhibition in it was in a bank, right? Like a space next to a bank.
Oh,
downtown. Yeah. I think it was Highland Mather.
Yeah.
That was fronting that space, and I remember seeing your show there. We probably had met prior, but I remember going there because I remember meeting you and liking you and going, yeah, I got to check out what Dan's doing.
Yeah, what weird stuff am I up to? Yeah, I think there was a gallery show, group show that I was in. It was a place off the tracks. I think Highland was curating, and I'm pretty sure Brian and Zach, Brian Andrews and Zach Smith was in that show, and definitely Karen McClanahan.
That was the one just south of King Supers off of Colfax, right?
Boy, I can't remember. I think it was.
It was a
yeah. Actually, I think that's about right. Because I think there's a popular Japanese restaurant around that area too.
Yep.
That we would go eat at as well.
That's the one.
Yeah. Brian Bonner's waving at us. So hi, Brian.
Brian Bonner.
Yeah, he's a horror person that I work with. So
yeah. I love a horror person I work with.
Yep. Yeah. No, he's pretty cool. He does paranormal research and stuff. But yeah, it's I think I remember meeting you through Zach and through Karen back in the day, and then going to definitely Karen's exhibition, and I think later on Brian Andrews had an exhibition at your gallery, and your Plus gallery was always the whenever you had a first Friday. Not every time, but as often as I could, make it, that's where I would go. And that's where I would get my education of what was going on in the city. And kind of my dose of culture, because it was always well curated, and you took such care of the artists and of the work. And that's always something that I really loved about you, was you were always there, to support and as well as to facilitate.
Well, thanks for saying that. To me, all of that seemed natural, and because I started the gallery as a reference to Cordell Taylor, my dear good friend, who was my biggest inspiration and collaborator in art, and like I didn't have any rationale for doing it. I just jumped in and said, what is the most intuitive way to approach this? And so everything, I think, particularly in the early years, was based on intuition and also naivety in a lot of ways. And I think those first 2 or 3 years, they were very tough, because I always had this notion that maybe most art dealers or emerging gallerists do, which is, oh yeah, I just need to bring cool stuff into my space and people are going to buy it. And no, that's not how it works. Nobody's going to buy your stuff, particularly in the early years, and you just have to fight it out and try to build your reputation. And, it did make sense to me over time, but I always feel very fortunate that we had nice participation with some of the local artists, Brian, Karen, Zach, great examples. They're each doing wonderful work, and it was Karen's work that helped us to get over that non-selling hump, where it's like, okay, here's something that is accessible. There was a lot more entry point into getting press at the time, which back then was crucial to developing a gallery reputation. Today, I would say, wow, that doesn't even exist anymore. So you put that out the window. How do you then build a platform that can grow over time and sell work and be credible? Things have changed so much since then, but I do remember that the keys for me were strong local support, building a movement that maybe others weren't fulfilling, but they were. I think about Highland Mather, and I think I I'd leave my openings and go to his and go, oh yeah, shit, this is where everybody's throwing down, and it's this big party, and it's so cool. And I was like, I don't know how he does it, but I just have to do something different. And actually, Highland was a huge influence on me in the early days. He was doing the kind of contemporary art that I really liked, respected. He's a crazy interesting character, and so I felt like back then the scene was way more rich than it is today, or at least maybe just very different, in a way that I think artists could rally around. But artists will always rally around what they have.
Yeah, I think, like about that time, I was graduating from art school with that same cast of characters, from Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. And it seemed like we hit at the right moment where the art community really kind of coalesced and became a very solid community, and everybody was supporting themselves. And I think they still are today. I think a great deal of what art is in the face of Denver is now more predominantly on the mural side or on the design side. But I think there's that cohesiveness and that connectivity. Obviously, stuff like the internet is makes up for a big component of that, because now you can go to Instagram and follow all your favorite artists and do direct sales to a point. But I also find it pretty interesting, because you were going into how Denver Digerati came to be, and I never really thought about the, like, to me it's conceptual digital animation, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's a whole platform of art, that we don't really think about, except for like on the more stream mainstream side with like Pixar or something like that.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's also a lot deeper than that too. And what most people don't realize, I don't wear the history on my sleeve so much. And even because the internet was still in its early phase of development through our early years, it was very hard to capture and document a lot of our rich history. But I was hosting experimental film nights and
cool
music nights, and to me, no other gallery was doing that, and I understood why. It's because there's nothing to monetize out of that. You just you have to be really into it to want to host those things. And I also think about my age and saying, yeah, you also have to have a lot of energy, put up with a lot. And those were some of the most beautiful experiences that I ever had as a gallerist. And one of them, Cartoon Express, this was Peter Burr coming to Denver saying, I'm doing this tour where I'm going to do a live performance. I'm going to show some animations. And that was one of the pinnacles of that whole series. I was like, this is so fresh and cool. And it really did make me start to think about my interest in film, which is very hard to parlay in a gallery context in any tangible way, other than saying, I want to show some stuff that nobody's going to consider purchasing, but that adds some zest to the environment. And so that felt like something very formidable for me. And when I, started seeing that technology was changing so rapidly, and all of a sudden there's this emergence of artists doing works that dip into animation, but you go, it's motion art, there's video art, there's all sorts of ways to depict this as art, but the category just happens to be very broad in my mind as to what that can represent and what how that can relate to a gallery program. It doesn't relate well because there's very few galleries that I think can leverage it into something that you you know, you can exist without an income source, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, you know, just great that that you were able to take it upon yourself to champion those artists. Because yeah, I'm sitting here thinking like how, yeah, aside from being commissioned or, you know, basically being, you know, taking that talent and rolling into like some kind of studio project, it's like, yeah, how can you really monetize it? It seems very, you know, tough. Yeah, as far as a gallery or some type of gallery exhibition or something, sponsorships, you know.
Yeah, it's hard enough getting sponsorships for Supernova today.
Right.
And, you know, I always had this idea that you know, the art world is very conflicted all the time, and of course, you know, it should be, just like anything in life. People always lump everything together, and you would say, well, by being a commercial gallery, you're quote unquote for profit. Lose tons of money, and yes, you have to make money to keep it afloat, but because you're a commercial entity, there's, you know, sponsorship comes in ways to me that I was experiencing that could be very egregious, like somebody saying, oh, well, I'd like to host an event in your space, or, you know, I remember we had a lot of real estate brokers that wanted to host things, and you would go, yeah, it's for your image, you want a cool space. You're not giving us money per se, you're just saying this is a win-win situation, and that's what most everybody would try to qualify with. Like, we don't want to look at you as anything but a tool for us and our image, and maybe to bring you something. But the reality is that, you know, sponsorship generally only comes if you're a nonprofit. And the moment that sort of seemed like it held some hope for me was in 2010, when the Biennial of the Americas started. This is really deep into why Denver Digerati got started at all. I looked at what the Biennial was trying to do, and they said, well, we'd like art groups around the city to host events that we can celebrate as the Biennial. And of course, because they want as much participation as possible, but not from the commercial galleries, where that's actually where all the really cool stuff was happening. And I remember saying, well, yeah, I'd like to curate a show for the Biennial, because it could open up some doorways. I like the premise. And I remember going to Aaron Trapp and saying, well, here's what I want to do, but I'm a commercial gallery. Is it possible to get some funding from the Biennial? And because she understood, you know, our position and the premise, we found a way that they could actually fund my project, even though it's a commercial gallery. And that project is the one that did inspire me. I found two wonderful artists that were working in animation, and that opened a lot of doorways for me to something that I hadn't really been paying much attention to, but said that's a great entry point.
That's cool. I think you know, when you do a Supernova, how many years have you been doing Supernova now?
Supernova, this is our 5th year as a festival, and yeah, it's pretty amazing to actually be in a 5th year. And if I would think back on running Plus Gallery, the first 3 years, I think the first 3 years, you feel good about what you're doing. You feel like an audience building, but there's no way to make it survive. And the pressure of that is really, really intense. And you realize how long it actually takes to build something credible. It doesn't happen overnight. We actually now live in a time where that's all anybody cares about, is how quickly can you make an impact. And you go, that's just, it's not only asinine, it's the death of our society in a lot of ways. But for running a gallery, my experience was things started really clicking in the 5th year, and in the 6th year, things were going great. And when I look at Supernova, I have to think about it along the same lines. Everybody that's not intimately involved might look at it and say, oh, well, what's our return on investment? You know, what are your figures? What are this or that? You go, are you really looking at what we're doing? You know, yeah. And understanding what that value is if you allow it to build over time. So, you know, being in the 5th year right now and being in the 5th year during a pandemic.
Oh my gosh.
It's both the hardest experience and also the most wonderful experience, because I'm feeling that the 5th year is really from an artist perspective and just a building the model perspective, things could not be better. And so, you know, I look at this as that giant hurdle that if we can get over it this year, the future could be beautiful. But then, of course, you know, the future might not exist at all for everybody. So,
right, yeah, that's true.
Particularly in the arts. We all made great choices, you know, to get into the arts 53 years ago.
And I think like times like these, this is when you have the most passion and you know, creative response, because you've got all those artists that are, you know, wanting to reflect society and reflect their situation and share that with the world, thereby creating, you know, culture. You know, one thing too, I keep whenever I talk to people is try to remind them, it's like your entire world is designed, you know, whether by artists, whether by designers, engineers, architects, you name it. Everything in your life has to be designed, not just the music that enriches your life or the painting on the wall, but everything. And it's
really, it can be. This was designed. This is one of my favorite designs.
Mine too. Just this little Yeti. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, obviously I live by the coffee mug. I mean, I'll die from it too. You know, I think coffee is absolutely, you know, a work of art, but also that fuel that motivates, you know, that spite that gets me up in the morning to go do cool shit. Or to go to the bathroom.
You're an all-day coffee drinker. Like, I can only have it in the morning.
I've greatly reduced. I'm basically 2 or 3 cups on the weekends, 4 or 5 maybe, but that's about it. You know, I try to you know, cut out around 7 p.m. I might have a little something after dinner.
How late do you stay up?
Not very late. I'm a very, very early riser. I'm usually up by about 3:30, 4 o'clock. And so I'm usually, you know, exhausted come 8. So yeah, I'll crash. Yeah, it's weird. My girlfriend, she had kind of a schedule like that where she would do most of her work between 4 and 9 a.m. And stuff. So I just kind of took on that. And now I can't stop.
Well, you know, unfortunately, you're probably younger than I am. I suspect by, you know, maybe a decade or so. I don't know, but
you look younger than me.
I wouldn't say that, not at all. But I would say that yeah, as you get older, you know, once you lock into a time and a schedule, it's really hard to unlock from that. That's what I'm finding, because I don't I wake up as early as you do, but I don't get out of bed. And you know, maybe I should, but yeah, it's a deep struggle to sort of say how much time do you need through the day. And so we're probably about on equal schedules in
right.
that the whole span. But yeah, I go to bed pretty exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting to talk to people about creativity and, things that, get you motivated. And I think it's like, especially right now with COVID and, having to self quarantine, being able to self motivate. You were talking about your son and his situation. Whether if he's not playing tennis, then he'd probably be playing video games and stuff, and watching anime. So that's one I didn't really expect with him, but that makes perfect sense too.
Every kid, well, maybe not every kid, but it seems like he's like going through the phases. Fortunately, his reading phase was at a very young age because he doesn't read anymore. I'm like, yeah, he could be a big reader. And when I think about, young youth culture now, I'm always astonished at like what that's going to mean for their life down the road. So when you throw a pandemic into this mix, I don't think it affects him, too drastically. And I would also look at myself and say, I work at home anyway, so I have no lack of. I don't sit around and go, what am I going to do? I'm really working. But when I think about him and where life is going, I think he's binge watched shows that television shows, full libraries of content before the age of 13, before the age of 11, and I go, that's an interesting premise because it will change the future no matter how you look at it, whether you see it as positive or a negative. Kids have access to things that you can't really prevent. It's the flow of time. And, some of the younger artists that I know that remind me of that digital native idea, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. And I go, wow, we really haven't seen the results of that yet. And they could be great. They could be frightening. Who knows? But, I would say every parent said that about their children's generation.
Right. Yeah. One thing I did notice, like, and this might not hold true for your son's generation, but like, people half our age, in their 20s, they're the number one reading demographic. It's not us, and ones that hold like tangible print books too.
How do you know that statistic? Because that I wouldn't have known that, but that that sounds like a beautiful thing to me.
Yeah, I found that to be pretty interesting. I was watching snippets of a documentary about booksellers, and they kind of compare and contrast like our generation and then the generation ahead of us and what book selling meant. And for the most part, it seemed to frame a lot of people that are passionate about reading. And that's pretty much what they wanted to do. They know a lot about books, and they have a bookstore. And like the younger generation they want to have that engagement with people. And, part of that is the collectivity of the book, the artifact, sharing it with people, having conversations, and figuring out new ways to sell, that old artifact. So I was like, oh, wow. People in their 20s are opening up bookstores, like brick and mortar bookstores, as well as online bookstores. But, they're having those in-person groups. Obviously right now they're doing what we're doing right now and doing like Zoom chats and talking about, talking about their experiences and being able to, talk about things in greater context. So I thought that was pretty exciting.
That is interesting. That is interesting. Like I've always, to this day, I'm a huge fan of reading books.
Yeah.
I love books. I've always loved books. And it, you know, every now and then I'll dip into this, you know, alternate space online where I might find something and go, oh, let's see what wormholes we can then go down. And what are you discovering? And yeah, when you look at some of the small presses and the things that are out there, I start to freak out and go, oh my God, like I could spend the rest of my week just checking this stuff out, and I want to buy it all.
Right.
And I love that, because, you know, I don't buy everything.
I love those type of dilemmas where you have to, like, you know, it's like, yeah, you find something that that you're passionate about, and you're invested in it, and yeah, if you can allow yourself the time and the freedom to see where that goes, yeah, amazing. I think the same is true for the artist as well. If you can, you know, latch on to something that, you know, you're really invested in, and just, you know, see where this painting takes you, or this sculpture, or, you know, maybe it's something more multimedia. I think, you know, one thing too, one question that yeah, I had for you is, you know, since, I mean, Plus Gallery exists right now as in, you know, you're representing some artists, but it's no longer a brick and mortar place, except in our hearts. But you know, do you still see, like, post-pandemic and everything, do you still see like a need for that brick and mortar gallery, or do you see things more like, especially with your digital, you know, Denver Digerati, you know, in digital art, you know, existing predominantly online anyway, you know, is that more of the way to go?
Yeah, you know, let me frame it this way. When I gave up our physical space in 2014, there were so many reasons, and none of them had to do with wanting to leave the space or needing to leave a physical space. Things were going great, and there were a lot of things about being in our location that were very unhealthy for me personally. There's this idea that nobody understands how much blood, sweat, and tears you've put into getting to that point. And it all felt like, you know, releasing that somehow and then trying to figure out what to do was the right time to do that. But one of the biggest rationales for that was this sense that people weren't respecting physical spaces quite the same, and that it's a very sacred place. It can be turned awry very easily if you let it. And my notion was always, I want to be inclusive. I want people in the door, but, you know, clients weren't coming during business hours. It's not like you're selling things the same way in a retail shop. And I felt like, well, my clients are dedicated and they're interested in what I'm doing. This is a great calling card, but it's very expensive. And I did start to feel like the future of physical spaces was going to be compromised because of things like Instagram and just this movement amongst art fairs and all of these things that we're building. And I said, well, I don't need to fight against that. Let's just step aside for a minute and see if there's something else that can be done. So when I think about what I have done in the last few years, it's trying to support artists that don't look at the gallery as the be all end all for the career, that they're making upward movements, and how you support that still has a lot of value to your clients and to me personally, and that I'm just an assistant within the greater scope of the artist's career. I do what I can for them, and it's led to some great moments. Now, when I think of sitting here today, And if I still had my physical space, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Right.
I would be in the biggest freak out mode of all time. And fortunately, I owned the building that we were in, but I really feel like having gone through a recession in a physical space as a gallery was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And it prepared, in a lot of ways, it prepared me for this moment. But in this moment, I don't have that excess baggage.
Right.
And I think it would have put me down this time. I can't speak for others, but when I see what has transpired with Adam Gildar leaving his gallery space, totally understanding why, kind of the same context, like he didn't have to, but it was the right thing to do. Tina Goodwin had a great gallery that, I'm looking at these galleries as similar to mine in that they're good people running them and trying to do something for the city and for their artists. And the fact that they're not there makes me go, they probably left at a good time too.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I look at the playing field now, I just go, I think it's really, really hard to invest in that physical space. I would do it again in a heartbeat if it was for a fraction of the cost to do so. If someone gave me a space to run, I would consider doing it. But, that's not how life functions, particularly within a capitalist society, and particularly within Denver, where rents are not just high, but out of control and completely fucked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's just putting it mildly.
For everybody. I have no problem with that. It's the biggest shit show anybody could ever imagine descending upon Denver right now. And I think it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. So many of our creative friends have had to, move out of Denver and Colorado altogether. And that's prior to the pandemic. You've seen like Rhino and the area of downtown that you occupied being completely gentrified, and now it's, well, even the businesses that moved into those places, I mean, they have the potential of going belly up right now, unless they can figure out some creative ways to stay afloat.
It's really sad. Like I still love that neighborhood. I left for good reasons. That's just one of many reasons, is when you see what that neighborhood was transitioning into, it wasn't transitioning into a neighborhood that wanted to support a quality contemporary art gallery. It was transitioning into something completely different. And there are quality, I guess there's maybe still some quality spaces there trying to sell art, but they're not the image of the neighborhood. And Rhino Images art is really dependent on the few anchors that remain, like Red Line, Temple. There's so many that have gone away that it's hard anymore to call it an art district.
It kind of makes me think that it's supporting digital art is probably an amazing way in such a probably a needed transition too, to for the art scene, kind of pushing things in more that direction. I don't really have a question here. It doesn't seem, but I'm kind of reflecting on how appropriate it is to really support like this abstract and conceptual art that does exist within the digital art community, because you don't really see or hear much of it unless you really go digging on YouTube or something.
Yeah, I mean, we developed the Supernova streaming channel last year as a way to say, if you house your curatorial project, maybe people will start to understand it. If it's just scattered across the universe or the internet, then you can see bits and pieces of it, but somehow it has to make sense. And you know, what I love about the medium is that when you hear the term digital, it can be a shut-off valve for a lot of people. And it certainly was for me when I thought of digital art. I remember moving to Denver and knowing an artist that was doing digital art and just going, wow, that's so bad. Like, I mean, it's, you know, it's, well, not bad, but just like, wow, that's not interesting to me. I want that. And you go, it's the problem is that when you term something, and you have to term things, they may not be appropriate terms. And when I think about digital art and digital animation and digital motion art and contemporary art and art, they're all the same things. And what's inspiring me right now is this idea that I've been using a computer now since I went to college, the first Macs. It's a tool that you absorb into your life, and you have no way, I don't have any way of removing that from my life. And things build within that context as tools for artists to use. And when you start to see artists that develop their training in traditional paths and methods, just like a painter or a sculptor, performance artist, anybody, and you see what they're starting to do with the digital tools, then it starts to really make sense that it's just, it's a tool that they're using that attracts them and that really allows them to create something that maybe defies the imagination, defies the odds, or could just simply be of interest to them because they've found a pathway in. And so what I've noticed just since the advent of Supernova is that everything that we started exploring as digital animation has evolved greatly in just in 4 years. Like it's still in its infancy, in my opinion, for this particular field that I'm trying to mine. But each year you're seeing progressions in a way that all relate to traditional artists taking digital tools and doing something with them. And I'll give I could give all kinds of examples, but the one that I want to deliver right now, because I think you'll appreciate this, because I found this artist on Instagram. I think she started following Denver Digerati on Instagram. Everybody follow Denver Digerati on Instagram.
Excellent. Yes.
Say that, right? So, but I don't pay attention to Instagram myself. But I noticed one day that I got on this artist that had followed us, and I looked at her work and I was like, oh, wow, she's a really amazing illustrator. I just loved her work. It reminds me of you in a lot of ways, and my love for your work and what you're doing and what all, you know, like I love art of all kinds.
Yeah.
And so when I saw her work, I was just like, oh, I want to dig a little deeper. I assumed that she was, you know, on the younger end of the scale, but the work just defied what I thought, you know, I'd seen in a long time. And so I reached out just to find out more. And I noticed that she had some really simple animations also within her. And as I dug deeper, which normally I wouldn't have time to, I saw that she was hand drawing illustration in a beautiful way, just like anybody. She was also doing some digital illustration, which I wouldn't have recognized as digital. And then she's doing animation. And I love the animation as much as anything. And then this opportunity materialized with History Colorado, just sort of out of the blue, this project that they're doing in September that's a scavenger hunt. Andrew Novik's involved. It's kind of cool. Hush right now, but I probably shouldn't have said any of that. But it's I
know nothing.
So they, you know, they approached us to say we want, you know, we're looking for a digital animator to create a component for this project, and they didn't, you know, the budget's negligible, but I thought, well, here's an opportunity to give this to an emerging artist. And she was the one that I went to because I felt like I could easily hand this over to a digital artist and it'll be one thing. But I saw this connection with how she was approaching her work and this project and saying, well, really, you're just asking somebody to use digital tools to get from this point to this point, and the project's turning out phenomenal. And I just go, that, you know, like, would we call that digital animation? Would we call it digital art? Would we call it illustration? What would you call it? You call it good art.
That's right.
So, and her name is Chandler Bree Dolan for everybody that wants to go follow her on Instagram as well.
Nice. So what was that name again?
Chandler Bree Dolan. She's a student at MSU.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's pretty sweet. So so follow Denver Digerati on Instagram and follow Chandler. The website that I've got, you know, kind of scrolling back and forth, denverdigerati.org. That'll get you more information on Supernova, right?
Yes. So we actually do have a separate website, but this is the perfect opportunity to let people know. So supernovadenver.com was the website previous to this year, because I always looked at Supernova as, you know, its own festival. It's part of what I'm doing with Denver Digerati, but it was really hard to define what Denver Digerati is until this year, when we did form an official nonprofit organization. And that's a big step up. And so, you know, we've put a ton of work into denverdigerati.org, the website. And this year, we're going to shift everything from supernovadenver.com to Denver Digerati. If you were to go to Denver Digerati right now and go to the Supernova page, we've just started populating information there in the last week, and that's going to be ramping up through the next few days to the point where you can get enough information that you might need right now, but maybe 2 weeks from now, you're going to see most of the information. And we're kind of holding back on announcing the artists this year, because we have a huge lineup of artists, and it felt better to see what happens if you trickle some information out. So that's a great place to go do that. There's a lot of things that if anybody's subscribing to supernova.video, that you can find there first. Some wonderful artist interviews, trailers for some of the works. We're trying to approach things in a different way this year for a lot of reasons, but part of it is just, you know, having a little extra time to think, having more team members. My team is spectacular, and if there's one thing that I've always had wonderful assistants and people working with me, but this year I feel like I would have collapsed if it wasn't for my team and those that are helping me, and they're all doing it for basically nothing, just like I am. And it's neat, because you really just, you know, none of it's easy, but it's being done for good reasons and with great group. And the artists, phenomenal artists.
That's fantastic. I can't wait to see what you've curated for this year. And you know, what's the dates that we can see the new Supernova?
Well, so here's the important thing for anybody to know, because Supernova, I've always liked to think of Supernova as a month-long celebration that has a focal day in the third weekend of September. So it's always been a live event, and everything, you know, goes towards that. But anybody that's followed us the last few years would know that we've had prominent exhibition at Redline. We've had intersections with the MCA Denver. We've had collaborations with RemCAD. We've had the DigiLounge through CU Denver at the DPAC. There's understudy. There's all sorts of dimension to it, but the live event has always been a one-day event where the appeal, I think, and what we want the public to know is that no city in the world is presenting this type of material to the public for free through LED screens. There's nothing else like it, and it's really cool to see this work in that context. But because of the pandemic this year, we're not able to have our annual forum in the Denver Performing Arts Complex. That's our partnership with the city, and you know, I'm sure it's no stretch of the imagination why we can't do that this year.
Right.
But we still can activate all of the public LED screens within a 6-block radius of the DPAC, which is what we'll be doing. So we're still going to have a live presentation date that we're calling the walking tour, where if you walk around all day, you're going to see phenomenal animation looping on every LED screen in downtown Denver throughout the day, and largely without commercials. I think there's one screen that we have to have a commercial block for 15 minutes every hour. But we're also going to put the regular programming on the 14th and Champa screen with sound.
Cool.
And if anybody wants to come out, it's an opportunity to get out of the house.
Yeah.
Put your mask on. You don't have to get near somebody. There's plenty of space to watch this happening in the public context. So that's one thing, and that's the modification of what we're used to. Outside of that, we're launching Supernova on September 3rd with the unveiling of 10 commissions made for the Nightlights Denver project, which will be presented on the Daniels and Fisher Tower. Now, if people don't know what that is, you should definitely check it out. It's one of the coolest projects in Denver. And what I love about it is that they've had some commissions to date, some wonderful works showing on the DNF Tower. I've selected 10 artists through the Supernova network, including some of the top artists in the world, to create the same commission level that local artists would be getting. And these works are dynamite. I've gotten 9 out of 10 in to date, and they're really astonishing, and I'm really happy with that. Those are going to be presented every single evening. And again, it's very easy. You just go downtown, and it's actually neater to go down now because there's not that many people on the streets. There's not much traffic. And so the like watching them in that setting, I think takes on a different dimension. And then because that's starting the month in September 3rd, we're going to be rolling out all of our typical programs that will be put into one day. We're going to roll out a program a day, not quite every day, but throughout the month on supernova.video. So in essence, all somebody would miss is that live context. You get to watch the full program of animation. The work this year, we got about 150% increase in our submissions. And I would say that the quality and the caliber this year makes me so happy that it's almost weird to go, we're not going to have the same ability with live presentation. Well, the online presentation is going to be phenomenal. And so that's our way of extending it throughout the month and saying, if you want to get out of the house, you can on one day, well, actually any day, but the one main day on the 19th. But otherwise, if you're interested, watch what we're doing through supernova.video. And then the last thing I want to mention, because this has sort of held up our announcements. Normally, we would have made probably an announcement a week prior to the press and to the public, but we just established a new relationship with Unity, which is a gaming engine that a lot of artists and animators are using to create very, very cool digital animation and motion works. And so we're going to have a Unity boot camp throughout the month that artists can, or anybody can register if they want to learn Unity. It's probably not an easy program to learn, but it's an amazing tool. And then we'll also have some other presentations that relate to Unity throughout the month. So on our website, there's a full schedule of all sorts of stuff. And you go, we're kind of doing the same thing. It's all month long. Only maybe there's something new every day, and it just depends on how you want to interface.
That's absolutely fantastic. So any animators, any artists that want to go out and pick up this tool, go check out Unity. Yeah, check out Supernova .video, but especially denverdigerati.org.
Dan, I do want to give a shout out to, like, when I mentioned the 150% increase in submissions. There's two factors that make me very proud this year, and we always try to pay attention to how things are developing. The first is that female artists that have been accepted into the festival are getting much closer to the same level as male artists. It's not quite there, but boy, are we seeing a lot of great work and a lot of movement in that from that direction. And to me, that's really terrific. The other thing too is that, it's hard for me to say we're just a local project. Supernova is an international network of artists, right, and we capture some of the best artists in the world easily. And that makes me proud, but we always like to draw it back to what's happening here in Denver. And so from the very start of the project, it was like, okay, who's doing this type of work in Denver? Right. It's hard to find them. And, there are artists there, but how do you capture that into your net? Well, this year, our local participation level has definitely increased. And what I always like to say is, if it's the same artists all the time, we do have some absolutely stellar artists that are local, like Kendra Fleischman, Michael Sperandeo, who always participate in this project. And I love how the project motivates their work. But we're seeing a huge increase in new artists that I've not been familiar with, or would say, oh yeah, maybe they're being inspired too. And that's an awesome, just everything about this year's slate of animation is really incredible and something I'm very proud of.
That's fantastic. Now, Ivar, is Supernova set up to take like public donations or any type of, how can patrons support what you're doing?
Well, if you're thinking about sending money to a political candidate right now, I can tell you that the money will be better spent if you just send it to Denver Digerati. It's interesting. Prior to this year, we need money just like any organization to survive. And I've never really asked for individual donations. Of course, somebody can donate individually, but this is the first year that we've implemented a donate button and page on denverdigerati.org. So if anybody does want to send money there, you feel free to. Right now, we probably won't be able to implement a system to donate to the artists because wrapping our arms around that, we're wrapping our arms around so many things right now that are new for us. But it is something that I could also see trying to implement eventually as a way just to say, yeah, if you want to send something to this artist or support this artist, Supernova functions by offering award and prize money that I believe is unprecedented in the field. So the awards that we give, I always try to make sure that they're more than what an artist would find anywhere else. Everybody loves this idea of recognition, and there is nothing wrong with that. It is so important for artists, but we try to have awards, competitive awards that some artists will be able to be selected for a cash prize. And we're putting way more into that than we are anybody's salary, because salaries aren't existent. So if anybody does want to support, through donating it, it'll go, I believe, in the right directions that it needs to keep our operation going. And certainly this has been a difficult year for finances.
Yeah, it is very much so. Ivar, I want to, say, thanks for, being so generous with your time and coming on and talking about the old days of Plus Gallery and how it exists now, but especially your new venture with Denver Digerati and the Supernova Festival and everything. It's pretty stellar. I think what you're doing, what you're continuing to do, and I always love to see the new talent that you've curated and put together and presented for the world to discover and support.
Well, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate it, and it's really cool for you to ask me to do this. And in general, can I throw in a little plug for you?
Oh, you're sweet. Sure.
I mean, I've really admired what you've done from the time that I met you. You have a humble nature, that a go-getting humble nature, which to me is very inspirational. And you always have the best outlook and approach to life. And I love your work. I know that prior to this year, I think the last time we interacted was when I was in your studio buying some wonderful art pieces from you, which
I remember those pieces.
I've shared them previously a long time ago. I'm holding on to them because they relate to the debacle that our society, the United States, has had to experience in the last 3.5 years, which at a certain level, you would say, wow, nobody saw that coming. And and coming being a good term in regards to what these pieces might represent. So,
yeah.
So I don't want to say much more than that, but I really love your work, and I love that you cover a wide range of interests and styles, and you've come up with something within the realm of comic book and illustration that I find to be extremely unique and rich, and I think everybody should support your work. The panels that I have are just exquisite, and I think that there's a huge audience out there for your work, and I know you work hard for that, as hard as anybody I know. So share the love, man. You're great.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much, Ivar. Thank you for everything that you do. I can't wait to see the new Supernova. I do think you have an amazing platform, and hopefully the rest of the world will really gouge into it and kind of eat it up in the full 4-course meal that it really is.
Well, thanks, Jen. I appreciate it, and it's great. It's great talking to you, and I hope there's people out there listening. I have no idea, but
there is. Yeah, we've got a few followers, and then we'll be sending this out even furthermore on Facebook. This will eventually end up on YouTube, so that you can share this a little bit easier. And then, but yeah, everybody out there, go to denverdigerati.org. Support Supernova and that wonderful endeavor. And for everybody out there too, have a wonderful Saturday. Thanks again, Ivar.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks. Yeah. Be good. Be kind to each other.
Right on.